It almost doesn't feel real that I have made it to the end of Full House. Again, this is my second time watching it all of the way through. And I first started reviewing it initially back in 2021. It wasn't until late 2022, early 2023 that I really started to review the episodes more regularly. Initially, I think I did a couple per week, and then I started to do it weekly. It has taken me quite a long time. It is now March 2026, and I don't want it to end. I know I can go back and watch the show, and I absolutely will do at some point. And there's Fuller House as well, of course, which I might rewatch at some point, but the quality is just, it's not the same as the original series. But it's undeniable. I have reached the end. It is time to discuss the final episode of Full House, Michelle Rides Again Part 2. This is directed by Joel Zwick, of course, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And as I touched upon briefly in the previous discussion, it's not great as a final episode. It wasn't actually the final one they filmed. The episode before Michelle Rides Again was actually the last studio episode that they filmed. But in terms of the last to be broadcast, this is the final episode. And as far as I know, they didn't have much notice. They didn't know the show was going to be cancelled too far in advance. Would they have come up with something better had they had more time? Yeah, I expect they would have done. Is it the worst finale ever? No, but it's not the strongest, but there are moments that I think are really great. So at the end of the previous episode, Michelle fell off of her horse. It didn't look like a catastrophic fall, but nevertheless, she hurt her head so badly that she now has amnesia. And Danny goes to see her in the hospital, and he says to her that he's so sorry for putting all of that pressure on her. And Michelle responds, "That's okay. Who are you?" I can't even imagine the pain that Danny would have felt in that moment. Meanwhile, back at the house, Andrew kisses Stephanie. They were rehearsing Romeo and Juliet before, and we also learn that Dwayne has a cousin who can take DJ to the prom, and Dwayne likes Shakespeare. I love that we get to see this other side to him. Over the last few episodes, he hasn't really been a very deep character, and that in itself is not a huge issue, but I do like that we get to dig a little bit deeper into the character. And I just spent the last 5 minutes talking about the episode and realised that for some reason my audio had stopped. So if I miss out something important or if I repeat myself, I apologise. For some reason the audio just broke. Hopefully it will behave for the rest of the recording. And we learn that Dwayne likes Shakespeare, as I said, and then Michelle comes home, and for a split second it seems like she recognises people, but then she says, "Aren't you the nice people I met at the hospital?" She thinks Comet is a girl. And then she asks everybody, "So, do you all live in the neighbourhood?" Which is fair. From the outside, even from the inside, the house looks like it's a little bit too small for the number of people, hence the title of the series, of course. And she then asks questions throughout the episode, and I don't love this. They're talking about Joey, and she asks, "He's my uncle, right?" And the girls say, "No, Jesse's our uncle." And I really don't like that they've just dismissed Joey completely there, because yes, technically by blood, Jesse is the only uncle, but Joey is an uncle in every other way. And I always think of him as their Uncle Joey. So for them to just say no is a bit harsh. Maybe they were trying to keep things basic and not overcomplicate things for Michelle. But at the same time, that could then tell Michelle that Jesse is more of a family member than Joey. So I think there are arguments kind of for and against why they would say that. But personally, I'm against it. And then she asks, "Where's my mom?" And yeah, that's the bit when I started to cry. And I cried throughout the episode. I cried sometime after. I will do everything I can to not cry during this discussion. But that's the point when I allowed myself to feel the pain of the fact that it's almost over yet again. And the following morning, Nicky and Alex decide to take advantage of the situation by pretending that Michelle told them that they could have one of her toys. And they're only young, they don't understand. They found a silver lining, they might as well go for it. And we do then have a very beautiful, very moving moment where Stephanie climbs into bed with Michelle and apologises for a fight that they had before all of this happened. And I thought that was a really lovely moment, a really nice thing to include. You never know when it's going to be your last chance to apologise and make amends. And yes, Michelle is still here, but it could have been so much worse. And I think Stephanie realised that, and I think that's a really nice message to include. We then get a bit of comedy. The mood lifts a little bit with Joey in his costume for the TV show, but the mood drops again very quickly. And Joey says, and I love this so much, Uncle Joey says, there's nothing that's more important than your family. And while I think that is debatable, it's certainly the core message for Full House as a TV show, and it was beautifully delivered. We then have a pretty great exchange, actually, between DJ and Michelle. DJ doesn't want to go to her prom, and Michelle says to DJ, how is skipping your prom going to make me better? You'll feel bad you're missing prom. I'll feel bad you're missing prom. I love that. I thought that was really a really valid point. I would probably be in agreement with DJ here. I would not want to go to prom if my sister had just got amnesia. But at the same time, Michelle had a valid point. Staying home is not going to change anything at all and will only be a negative. So DJ decides to go, and nobody wins if she stays at home. So I thought that was a pretty great message. There are a lot of really great messages in this. And then Danny shows Michelle some photos in the family album. It was a nice way to flash back without relying on clips, though I wish we could have seen a bit more of that and maybe even heard a few more memories. I think they could have done a little bit more with that, especially since this has been dragged out for 2 episodes. Granted, the horse incident didn't happen until the very end of the previous episode, but they could have spent just a little time reflecting. And I say that as somebody who hates flashbacks. I generally hate clip shows. I think that it's just often, not always, but often really pointless. But it would have been nice to have had even just a teeny tiny montage of Michelle, or even just, again, more photos in the album to show us things in a bit more detail. So I feel like we didn't get enough memory there. And I was a little bit disappointed by that. But then we do get a really brilliant moment. Michelle understandably is feeling tired. She goes to have a nap. And while she's napping, she sees her memory in herself. And Mary-Kate and Ashley are both on screen at the same time, which I just thought was such a lovely thing to do for the final episode. It's not the first time. There was an episode many seasons ago where they played Michelle and Michelle's cousin, which was an absolute joy. They were teeny tiny at that point. I think barely speaking at that point, but to have them on screen again at the same time, I thought was a really lovely thing to include, and it's so moving and heartfelt, and just one of my favorite Full House scenes ever. It's so it's so beautifully executed. And her memory comes back. Definitely need to suspend disbelief with this episode, but it's not really a big deal. And she goes downstairs and she starts making remarks that indicate that her memory's back, and it's a really lovely moment. And then Kimmy arrives, ready for the prom, with the iconic light up pink dress. Absolutely love it. And it turns out that Dwayne's cousin couldn't actually make it after all. But Kimmy found a backup for DJ. It's Steve, which I thought was such a great choice. I can't say too much about this, but I think it was really significant that Steve came back at the end. I don't want to say too much about why, but I think it was a really, really good decision. And I don't know if they were planning this with, decades down the line in their mind, but I think it was a really solid decision for multiple reasons. And it was just nice to see Steve again. And the episode ends with everybody hugging in the living room. The whole cast is there, apart from Comet. I don't know if Comet was maybe out of frame, but certainly the version on Prime, Comet's not in the picture. I'd like to think that he was in the room, but maybe he just wasn't close enough to be in the final shot. But it was otherwise perfect, beautiful. All of the core cast there. It would have been nice to include Michelle's friends, to maybe have Michelle's friends come over and try and encourage her memory. I don't know if in real life that would be a sensible decision, but within the context of the episode, that could have been good. So I think maybe it would have been nice if the first episode, Michelle Rides Again Part 1, had the incident maybe halfway through, but I know what they were going for. They wanted a dramatic ending so that more people would tune in to the final episode. I understand completely why they held the amnesia back and then leaving it on a dark cliffhanger. But in terms of storytelling, I think it would have been better if they'd had the accident halfway through the first part and then brought her home, and then maybe picking up this episode somewhere in the middle of where this one was, and giving a chance for Michelle's friends to come over and really having all of the recurring characters in this final episode, or at least in the final two. But I think they could have done a really solid job with that, and it would have been more moving and more emotional. But again, had they only found out about this with not a lot of notice, there's a very strong chance that the children wouldn't have been available anyway. So I'm not saying that they made any wrong decisions, just judging it from my perspective and what I think could have made it stronger. Even if they wanted to do this storyline, there are things that could have been done differently that I think would have been more moving. But time constraints, the last minute availability of certain cast members, it just might not have worked out. So it's completely reasonable. It's still, in its way, a good finale. It's not the best, it's not the strongest, but it gave us a chance to really focus on the family aspect, on the concept of pulling together to be there for Michelle in this case. And we had a tiny bit of memory aspect, but at the same time, they could have done a lot more reflecting. And again, I say that as somebody who hates reflecting. I hate flashbacks, I hate compilations, I hate clip shows, but it would have been a bit more powerful in this one. Just a little bit of it. But nevertheless, it's not terrible. It's not the worst. This is me stalling because I don't want to end this discussion. I do not want this to be the end. I might have to go back and watch the first couple of episodes, just to ease the pain. I'm not ready to watch Fuller House again. I don't even know if it's currently on Netflix in the UK. Okay, I can confirm that Fuller House is on Netflix, and I started watching the first episode just a couple of minutes, and it was a big mistake because I forgot that the intro had footage of the cast then with footage of the cast, well, now at the time. And yeah, seeing the footage of Bob Saget was, yeah, no, I'm not ready to watch that yet. And as much as I'm not ready to end this here, I guess I'm going to have to. All things considered, Michelle Rides Again Part 2 definitely has some beautiful moments.